This is one of those topics that no one really wants to think about, but if you're a parent, a homeowner, married, or helping take care of aging parents, it's something that honestly deserves a little attention. I'm talking about estate planning. And before you tune out thinking it's complicated or expensive, that's actually why I want to mention Trust and Will. Trust and Will makes estate planning feel way less intimidating than it sounds. They offer modern, attorney-designed wills and trusts that you can create online. And the process is surprisingly straightforward. In fact, you can create a will in as little as 30 minutes. That includes things like guardianship for your kids or pets, how your assets are distributed, and even healthcare directives. Don't wait until it's too late. Protect your loved ones with Trust and Will, the most trusted name in online estate planning. Go to trustandwill.com/future to get 20% off. That's trustandwill.com/future for 20% off. trustandwill.com/future.
Hey, warmer brother low! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined here in a few minutes by Tristan Freeman. He does such great work over at Bustin' Brackets. We're just going to keep it to a 2-segment podcast, mainly because we've got a billion guys entering into the transfer portal, but they can't sign with anyone quite yet. We really didn't see a lot on the coaching news front here on Tuesday either. We saw George Ivory not be extended over at Mississippi Valley State. Can't say that this one was a shock of the century, as for our good friend George Ivory, it was one of the better fades in all of college basketball. He went 12-118 at Mississippi Valley State over the last 4 seasons. I'm sure that Brad Stevens will be getting a call from Mississippi Valley State, and I'm sure that call will not be taken. So that's going to be interesting to say the least. Really didn't see a lot on the news front there. We had a few coaches get introduced, yip-de-doo, because you got a lot of guys trying to fire up their fan bases. What do you expect there? So not a ton on that front, but we do have ourselves a Final Four that's going to be going down. Want to dive in on that with Tristan Freeman here in this segment. He does a great job over at Bustin' Brackets, Field of 68. I know he's been doing some work with the Seth Davis site, Hoops HQ, and so much more. So we're going to chat with him about the Final Four, and he's out there in the city of Pittsburgh, so we'll talk about some of the ACC coaching hires with the fact that Boston College, they land Bill Murray's son, which I still think is tremendous, and I think that it helps out Boston College a little bit. Talk about Syracuse, and I know he's going to go in a little bit as well on the reuniting of Will Wade over at LSU as well, so we'll talk about that. And then we actually have college basketball games on this Wednesday. I'll give you guys picks and analysis on both the Crown games that we've got for this Wednesday as we hit some bank shots in the final segment. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, do have one or two ways to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GNet_81. Keep in mind, Larry CM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, and like I said, this podcast will be going into off-season mode the very moment that the Nets are cut down out there in Indianapolis. I'll be keeping you guys abreast of all the coaching moves that we see. Like I said, not going to do anything really with the transfer portal as of right now. We've got a billion guys that are submitting their name. You really can't sign with a team until a few days after the NCAA tournament wraps up, so there's really not much to be doing there. More guys entered the transfer portal last year than actually came back to school, so we're just going to let that iron out the way that it did. Like, if I had to read off a list of guys that entered in the transfer portal on Tuesday, you guys would probably be here for about 45 minutes, and it would just be nauseating. So we're just going to get into it, get into the good stuff with our good friend Tristan Freeman. You're able to follow him onto the old Twitter/X at HoopsNut351 all together. And Tristan, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Greg. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you, Tristan. And Tristan, now there's only 4 left. Well, if you take a look at the NCAA tournament, we've got the Crown, we've got the NIT, but let's call it what it is. It's the Final Four of the NCAA tournament. And just what have you made out of the NCAA tournament thus far? Because it isn't quite as shocky as it was last year. We didn't get 4 1 seeds into the Final Four, but certainly the cream rose to the top with one of the few teams that didn't beat Duke because of that massive collapse.
We're set to have a great Final Four with 2 top teams in Illinois and UConn who at times look like a 1 seed, even if the resumes didn't show it. And obviously Arizona and Michigan have been 2 of the top 3 or 4 teams the entire year. So we're going to have a great Final Four. But overall, it was a good tournament. We had some close calls. We didn't necessarily get as many double-digit seed upsets, but a lot of the games were close and exciting, and we still had great stories like Iowa and Nebraska. So overall, it's been a very satisfying tournament and should be having a very satisfying ending as well.
And I think that this is something I've picked up on from the NCAA tournament. I want to get your thoughts here. I really think that where the NIL and the little bit of this disparity we're seeing from these high major teams, these top teams, and the mid majors is coming through is really with regards to depth. Because I even go back to like Alabama versus Hofstra in the first round of the NCAA tournament. You look back at all those Elite Eight games. The underdog was leading throughout much of them and then let go of the rope late. How much would you say that perhaps with regards to NIL, it's not necessarily the top talent that is really shining through, it's the depth, because I feel like it's been a case where a lot of these bigger teams have really pulled away in like the last 10 or so minutes of these games.
And that's definitely been the case, it's going to be hard to beat the top teams for 40 minutes. You also have the factor of the top tier freshmen and international players coming to fruition for teams like Arizona and Illinois. So it is interesting the impact of NIL when it comes to the upsets. But ultimately, teams 5 through 8 didn't have as much success either compared to the other seeds. Maybe we'll continue to see, the top be super heavy, but who knows?
Yep, it was very much saved by the fact that Iowa was able to get the job done against Florida. But to your point, yeah, it was a little bit of a letdown there, as we do have Tristan Freeman, who does such amazing work over at Boston Brackets, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And now that we do have the Final Four set, I know you mentioned it in passing with regards to Michigan and Arizona, and the way that I look at this game is the de facto national title game, and I want to get your thoughts here, because I think that these are the two best teams in all of college basketball. Right now, Michigan is a slim favorite, and if you want to make Arizona a slim favorite, which I did, I have no qualms about that whatsoever. But how do you look at this matchup? Because I do think that whoever wins this game should be the favorite over whoever wins that Illinois versus UConn game.
Yeah, I mean, this is a matchup where, on one hand, if you're Michigan, you're excited because Arizona's strength is scoring inside the arc. But there's no team that's tougher to do that against than Michigan, who has Ademar, Morris Johnson, and Yaxel Lindenberg, and their three big lineup can match up with Arizona's three big lineup as well. So, Wildcats are probably going to have to make some shots, but I'd argue that they have the edge in the backcourt with Jaden Bradley and Braden Burry. So if those two can go and make some shots, then Arizona has a great chance. But as you mentioned, it's going to be a fantastic game. So many bigs, including, Florida's three big lineup as well. It's probably going to continue to trend where you're going to see a lot of teams start to go as big as possible and try to compete with them in the future.
Yep, no question about it. And I do think that this is such an interesting matchup. And this is what I've been saying about this game, and I want to get your thoughts here. I think that if you find the absolute A+ of A+ games, both of these teams in Arizona and Michigan playing at their best, I think that the best of Michigan is a little bit better than the best of Arizona. But I would argue that Arizona has been the more consistent team this year and is perhaps a little bit more of the well-rounded team. I'm not sure how you take a look at that or not, but I do think that if both teams get to their A+ game, Michigan pulls it out. But if there are some stumbles along the way, I feel like I trust in Arizona to get through adversity a little bit more.
I agree that Michigan's best has absolutely been the best because they can just absolutely blow the doors off. But Arizona is a good enough defense where I don't think that's going to be able to happen. And I think with Arizona, while their high may not be as high, I think their floor is a bit higher because when Michigan's not making shots, they can be vulnerable. And we've also seen Michigan's defense fall asleep a little bit. They had a shootout with St. Louis for the first half of their round of 32 game before eventually blowing them out. If their defense is not up for it against Arizona, then I can see the Wildcats, find a way to get themselves a 10-point lead and put Michigan on the ropes. And as we saw with the Wisconsin game and even against Purdue, if you have Michigan coming from behind, maybe their execution isn't as good.
Yep, I do agree with you there. I do think that for Michigan, if they can find that peak of peak and both teams are playing at an A+ level, they find a way. But I just feel like Arizona's been the most consistent team in all of college basketball this season. But either way, that is going to be a titanic matchup. And then on the flip side of things, you've got Illinois versus UConn, where Illinois is currently the favorite in this game. The metrics do favor Illinois a little bit, but I want to get your thoughts here because I do feel like the overall setup actually lends itself a little bit better for UConn because I just trust in the coaching when you have a little bit of a layoff like this. And then additionally, with playing in a football stadium, I do have a little bit of fear that the fact that Illinois is a top 20 team in percentage of field goal attempts that come from three might hurt them in this sort of an environment.
Yeah, I mean, UConn has not had an easy path to get to the Final Four. I mean, even if you want to include Furman for a decent portion of their game, I mean, they were pretty much in it with all their opponents, but they found a way to win. And when you have the front court of Caravan and Terrace Reed that can get you points inside, and you can get just enough production from your guards and wings, including Ray Mullins, who has been great this whole tournament, even before the game winning shot. Yeah, I do think that they have a chance. And look, Keaton Wagler is going to be the star attraction in that game. You have the Vicious brothers, and then you also have, Stojakovic, who can get you points from the wing. So I think there's going to be a lot of points in this game, and it's likely going to come down to which defense can step up at the right time. But I do think while it won't be, as anticipated as Arizona, Michigan, I still think this could be a highly entertaining game in its own right.
Yep, I do agree with you. I do think that this is going to be a highly entertaining game. And just how do you take a look at the coaches that are remaining in the Final Four? Because I just think that with Dan Hurley winning 2 out of the last 3 titles, even though it is a case where Michigan and Arizona, yeah, on paper they've got the better teams, I put Dan Hurley as the best coach remaining in the Final Four. And then I really do feel like in that Arizona versus Michigan game, it's really splitting hairs between Tommy Lloyd and Dusty May, even though May is the one that has been to a Final Four before.
Yeah, you mentioned. I mean, I think some people would argue that UConn might be the weakest team, but they have the one coach who's proven, and the others, trying to break through it. It's a fascinating development. I'm very interested. Tommy Lloyd, who has sort of had his missteps in the tournament, but he's been able to breeze through it, sort of have his breakthrough. Obviously, the UNC Whispers is something to watch. We'll see if that's potentially distracting. But overall, Hurley will have the advantage. But, all these other coaches have proved, that they're really good. And all it takes is, one great team for a coach to win their first time. And, these other coaches, especially, Lloyd and May, absolutely have a team that can get them their first title.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I think that that's going to be a lot of fun. And man, we've got ourselves a tremendous Final Four that is going to be coming up. But I know that you, Tristan, your work, it just does not end. I know you're taking a look at a lot of the transfer portal, which I hope that you're doing what I'm doing and making a list of guys that aren't going into the transfer portal rather than guys that are, because the list of guys that are is going to be longer than the guys that are not. It's going to be wild this offseason, but I mean, it's a little bit easier to keep track of the coaches. I know that you're out there in Pittsburgh, so you gauge a lot of ACC and Atlantic 10. We've already seen some shakeups in those conferences, and how do you take a look at the cycle thus far? Because I do feel like for the ACC, the coaching hires that we've seen made this offseason have been pretty solid. With NC State, I feel a little bit suspect on that front, but I think hiring on, ironically enough, the son of Bill Murray for Boston College, that's going to be able to help them out a little bit. And then Jerry McNamara heading on over to Syracuse just feels like a match made in heaven for them.
Yeah, I mean, and arguably, I think, for some ACC fans, we're hoping for more changes where you see, Pitt and Wake Forest, stand pat. But getting a national champion coach, Luke Murray, to take the Boston College job, ultimately, you just want the Eagles to be competitive. As long as they're not, a quad 3, quad 4 loss, if you have to lose to them, that's all you can ask for them as a program. And then, yeah, I mean, Jerry McNamara, I would say weeks before the tournament, he probably wasn't viewed as a serious candidate. But the way that he was able to navigate Siena, winning the MAC tournament, and giving Duke the biggest fight possible in the 16th seed, I think it made it easier for them to accept them. But as you see with North Carolina, who seems intent on going outside the family, maybe that's what Syracuse is going to have to do. Although UNC has had success with different coaches, Boeheim is all Syracuse has had, and leaving that tree is probably going to be easier said than done for the time being. But we'll see what McNamara can do and whether or not he can get some star Siena players to go with him, and if they have the resources to be competitive and get back into the postseason.
Yep, you've got Jerry McNamara back. You've got an Anthony on campus as of right now, and Carmelo's son as well. I really don't think he's going to be entering into the transfer portal with what we see out of this. So that's going to be very interesting to say the least. And just how do you gauge that North Carolina job right now? Because from everything I've heard, and I'll be honest here, I really don't have insider sources, but it does feel like Billy Donovan is relatively interested in this job. It feels like that's the name that I've been seeing pop up the most. And then with regards to everyone else, obviously Tommy Lloyd has been popping up in a lot of these conversations. I know there are a few rumors about Dusty May, not a ton there, but it feels like for North Carolina, it's whoever has a big name right now is going to be getting a call.
It's an awesome job, great history. Even with Hubert Davis, ultimately failing, he still took the team to a national title game and was a 1 seed. So even coaches who people might think isn't up to it can still have great success there. So yeah, whether you're Tommy Lloyd or Dusty May, or who knows if they'll get the 2-time winner Billy Donovan back, but whoever gets the job is going to be set up to succeed and still be tier A up next to Duke in the ACC. And I will say, even though the portal doesn't open until next week, you do want to hurry up because a lot of these players already know that they're entering the portal, and a good portion of them know where they're going to end up. So you still want to get started when it comes to roster building and see which guys are leaving, who you want to maintain, including Henry Visar, who, if he would enter, would be one of the top players in the portal.
Yep, no question about it. That's going to be interesting to look at. And this one will be a little bit more open-ended, but we've already seen a lot of coaching moves made this offseason. Is there one or two that do stand out among the rest? Maybe it is one that we already talked about in the ACC, but is there just a team or two that you just really felt like did a great job with their higher end? They're set up for success long-term.
I don't know if it's guaranteed to be successful, but all eyes are going to be on Will Wade at LSU. I mean, the Tigers have been at the bottom of the SEC ever since he left. And, obviously Matt McMahon struggled, but, you can still win at LSU. There's still talent there. But, this is an SEC where they're pretty much competitive from top to bottom outside of maybe South Carolina. It's not going to be easier. It's probably gotten a lot harder for Will Wade. I mean, for LSU ever since the first time Will Wade was there. So we'll see if it works. I mean, he took NC State to the tournament, although they probably underachieved. But, there's going to be real expectations for him back there. And we'll see if he's good enough to take him to the tournament. It's going to be fascinating. Obviously, they'll be expected to get out the basement. But how much success is going to be enough, considering all the fanfare and, the reaction his leaving NC State has caused?
Yep, exactly. And Will Wade has already had success while he's been over at LSU, so there's already a track record there. LSU clearly has resources. Yeah, I have to wonder how many of those they've already used up on the football front. Kim Mulkey, they've done a lot of spending over the last few months, but that said, certainly Will Wade, he knows the landscape there. McNeese was very nearby as well, so I do think that was a great move for them, and it's always a great move to get you on this podcast, Tristan, because you do an amazing job looking at this wonderful game that we all know and love of college basketball, so love the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yes, sir. You can follow me at Hoopsnut351 on Twitter/X. You can also follow some of my other work at Bustin' Brackets and also Hoops HQ and the Philo 68 Daily every Friday morning.
Absolutely. Tristan doing an amazing job looking at this great game of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights and did so once again today. So a big thanks to Tristan for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Coming next, it is that time of the podcast to give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some big shots.
This is one of those topics that no one really wants to think about, but if you're a parent, a homeowner, married, or helping take care of aging parents, it's something that honestly deserves a little attention. I'm talking about estate planning. And before you tune out thinking it's complicated or expensive, that's actually why I want to mention Trust and Will. Trust and Will makes estate planning feel way less intimidating than it sounds. They offer modern, attorney-designed wills and trusts that you can create online. And the process is surprisingly straightforward. In fact, you can create a will in as little as 30 minutes. That includes things like guardianship for your kids or pets, how your assets are distributed, and even healthcare directives. Don't wait until it's too late. Protect your loved ones with Trust and Will, the most trusted name in online estate planning. Go to trustandwill.com/future to get 20% off. That's trustandwill.com/future for 20% off. trustandwill.com/future.
Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Peters, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Always great to be able to get Tristan Freeman aboard. Does such great work over at Bustin' Brackets. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights. Did so once again today. So big thanks to Tristan for joining me in the last segment. For some reason, I was thinking the NIT games at first were starting up on Wednesday. It said they are tomorrow, but I've got picks and analysis for you on the two games that we've got here in the Crown as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at GUNet_D1. Very easy to go in Las Vegas rotation, or we'll go with the earliest game first and then the latest game. That'll be the second game. So we go 891, 892. Oklahoma and Colorado do battle from lovely Las Vegas. Oklahoma opens up as a 5.5 point favorite. Now they're a 9 to a 9.5 point favorite. 165.5 to 166 is the total. I did take a shot here on the under. I set my total more at a 163.5. For Oklahoma, this has been a great offense. Top 25 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And it does appear as though you're going to get both Nigel Pack along with Xavier Brown in the lineup for this team. They combined for over 32 points per game during the regular season. With Pack, he packed it in, shooting over 40% from three-point range. That's massive because we saw last year in the Crown everyone was opting out. So that's going to be able to help them out. Muhammad Wagyu, 7.6 half rebounds per game. But what I think is going to be able to keep Colorado lively in this game is the fact that Oklahoma gives up a lot of second and third chances. 282nd in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Both of these teams just brutal on defense. Oklahoma 264th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Colorado was about 281st, and Colorado just gave it up from three away from them. Games played away from them. They allowed teams to shoot 38.5% from three, 346th in the country. So Oklahoma will be able to find some good looks there. But for Colorado, one thing that they've done a nice job of is get to the free throw line and knock down their free throws. Top three scorers in Sebastian Renich along with Isaiah Johnson, Barrington Argris, all shot at least 81.5% at the free throw line. For Colorado, this was a top 100 team. There's a point scored on a per possession basis. Now, they only shot about 33% from three away from them, but Hargris shot overall 48.5% from three-point range, 14 points, 4.5 assists per game. Isaiah Johnson, top scorer, was able to give you 17 points per game. The ancillary guys are pretty good for this team as well. You were able to have Alan Michelli be able to provide about 7 points, 4 boards, was able to give you a few threes as well for this Colorado team. They were okay with regards to the inside, top 150 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage, a team that would put you on the free throw line quite a bit, so that's going to be able to help out Oklahoma in this spot. Oklahoma overall for the season, they were shooting about 74.5% of the free free-throw line. That's a top 100 mark in the country, but Oklahoma not a team that will put you under duress. Outside the top 250 with regards to turnovers generated on a per possession basis, with Colorado making the most out of their possessions, top 55 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and this being a relatively mid-tempo game, with Oklahoma 176th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Colorado looking to play a little bit faster, but not necessarily warp speed from them either. There in terms of total possessions per game, about 90th. I think that this total is just a hair too high, so my total 163.5, like the under, and I won't take anything of 8+ with Colorado, made them a 7.5 point dog. Wrap things up with a 93, 94. Baylor and Minnesota do battle from lovely Las Vegas. Baylor is a favorite of between 3.5 to 4 points. Total is 148.5. Semi-line at a 3.5. So 4+ does become my buy point on Minnesota. Now Minnesota, towards back half of the season, they were playing with pretty much like 6.5 healthy guys, so they're going to have a thin rotation here. I don't think that any of the guys that are injured are going to be coming back for this run, but Trtistan, he was Mr. Do-It-All for the team all season long. 19.5 points on 42% three-point shooting. You got a pair of guys in Isaac Usama, along with Langston Reynolds, were able to combine for about 8.4 assists per game. Between the two of them, you were able to get about 23 points per game. Jalen Crocker-Johnson, right now dealing with ailment. He announced that he's going to be back for Minnesota. Not going to be back in this game, but he'll be back next year. So, team is a little bit fired up. I do believe that this is the sort of event where a guy like a Nico Medved can get the most out of his team. And for Minnesota, they play really stinking slow. 361st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Baylor was 129th, but they were more of a country average team with regards to their tempo in the back half of the season. Now they should have darn near everyone out there in this game. Tonde Yusufu is making the ride, about 18 points, 6 rebounds. Not a great three-point shooter, but I believe Cameron Carr should be in there as well. He's really the main guy for this team. 19 points per game, shoots 39% from 3, where the bread is buttered for Baylor. Top 20 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. Over 34.5% of their misses became an offensive rebound. Minnesota was a top 100 defensive rebound percentage team, so they didn't allow a ton of second and third chances. Dan Skilling's relatively solid, 9.5 points, 6 boards, and then Obi Edgem was able to come on strong in the backcourt as well, 10.5 points per game for a Baylor team that they were about country average in terms of taking care of the ball, neither here nor there. Now Minnesota, outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis away from home. They did have some very demonstrative home and road splits, but Baylor just completely fell down the toilet bowl in the second half of the season. It felt like bringing in James Nanji just completely ruined this team. They've got not a lot of depth as well. That's why they brought in Nanji, so I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a slowed down game. I think that the motivation keeps Minnesota in this game, and I think that that's actually very important in this spot. So my total 147.5. I like the under, and with Minnesota, we'll take 4+ with them, and that'll wrap things up for the Wednesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to Tristan Freeman over at Bustin' Brackets for joining me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, do have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @G_D1. Keep it behind Larry CM. Name does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I'm coming at you guys every single day with picks and analysis on every game, every day, so I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.